I sang it for him, and he loved the song, recorded it. He wanted me to stay in Nashville and just write songs for him.
Willie Nelson is one of the most renowned country music legends in America. Over the years, he has recorded hit after hits, which has earned him praise and admiration among fans. For the span of his career, he has also seen some worthy collaborations with other big names in the industry, like Kris Kristofferson, with whom he has shared some really amazing moments. However, Nelson's journey to the top wasn't without its own challenges, as he faced some situations that almost dealt a blow to his career. In some of these difficult moments, it was the push and support that he got from the likes of Kris Kristofferson that kept him going. Years later, he has some really revealing things to say about his relationship with Kristofferson. So just sit back as we unravel the bond that existed between these two. Born on April 29, 1933, in Abbott, Texas, Nelson was born as the younger of two children to Ira Doyle Nelson and Merle Marie Greenhaw. Being born into hard times, he was very resilient since his childhood years. When he was young, his parents divorced, and after his divorce, both left soon afterward, leaving Willie and his sister Bobby to be raised by their grandparents, Alfred and Nancy Nelson. Their grandparents were highly religious and introduced the siblings to music through church hymns and gospel songs. Willie's grandfather gave him his first guitar when he reached the age of 6, and he soon took a liking to music. This singular gesture from his grandfather made him a very pivotal figure in Nelson's life, leading up the path that would later define his future career. At 7, Nelson began writing his own songs. Despite struggling with the lean financial fate of the family, the Nelson household was heavily invested in traditional music, filled with country, gospel, and folk music, from which Willie received much encouragement. His sister Bobby, a talented pianist, proved equally instrumental in the young Willie's musical tastes. Later on, Nelson attended Abbott High School, where he was an energetic participant in sports and the arts, playing football and basketball, and was also a member of the school band. Still in high school, he began performing at local dances and honky-tonks for a few dollars, playing with bands such as Bohemian Polka. The early exposure he had to live performances taught him how to keep audiences entertained, a skill he would continue to sharpen throughout his career. Willie graduated from high school in 1950 and briefly attended Baylor University in Waco, Texas, studying agriculture. He soon realized his heart was elsewhere, so he dropped out after 2 years to devote more time to his passion. Young Nelson also worked at various jobs that included picking cotton, making saddles, and working as a radio disc jockey. These struggles reflected the financial background of his family, where he had to struggle to make ends meet with different careers. This struggle to make headway in life even took him to the military at some point. Willie joined the United States Air Force in 1950, when he wanted to serve his country in the Korean War. However, his military career did not last too long due to some injuries that he had. He was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where he started training as an airman. But because of back problems due to injuries in his childhood, he was honorably discharged after less than a year. Upon his discharge, Nelson returned to Texas to pick up where he left off, playing in small clubs and continuing to hone his craft as a songwriter. This was an important period that determined his distinctive style, a traditional country blended with jazz, blues, and folk. The early life of Willie Nelson was a struggle that led to his resolve to stardom. Growing up in Abbott, along with service in the military, instilled in Nelson the toughness and discipline he needed to provide revolutionary fuel to his music career. However, despite the fact that Nelson started honing his career in music early enough, and even got early exposure to stage performances, the road to country music icon wasn't smooth for Willie Nelson. To begin with, he was born into instability in the home, well before any occupational hazards would present themselves. When he was still a young boy, his parents divorced, and both his mother and father eventually left to pursue other passions, leaving Willie and his older sister Bobby in the care of his paternal grandparents in Abbott, Texas. Nelson has reflected on how his grandparents, who were poor but morally upright and musically endowed, raised Willie and Bobby on hymns and gospel songs. As Willie grew older, the family's hardships only deepened. As we have already learned, he had to depend on odd jobs, from picking cotton under the hot Texas sun to selling encyclopedias door to door, which supported him and his burgeoning music career. Early struggles in life instilled a great work ethic, but also left Willie with a sense of restlessness and a yearning for stability. It wasn't until the late 1950s that Nelson started seeing some promise as an up-and-coming songwriter, penning first hits like Crazy, made famous by Patsy Cline, and Nightlife, later recorded by Ray Price. However, the transition from songwriter to performer didn't go as well. When Nelson decided to pursue his recording career, he immediately ran into a lot of obstacles. There were several commercial failures in a row. At some point, it seemed like he wouldn't be able to meet up with the demands, but his resilient spirit held him up through it all. His early albums, such as And Then I Wrote 1962 and Here's Willie Nelson of 1963, did not get as much attention as he required, leading him to second-guess himself for a while. Although he was an excellent songwriter, he was not able to make his voice recognized in a highly competitive industry with an extremely polished and formulaic sound that did not extend to his raw style. To make matters worse, his personal life was turbulent. The marriage of Nelson to his first wife, Martha Matthews, was tempestuous, always resulting in different issues and full of frequent arguments. There was even a time when Martha sewed him up in bed sheets during an argument and proceeded to beat him with a broomstick. The marriage, despite their 3 children, ended in divorce, which left Nelson emotionally sapped and disoriented. Willie also felt his frustrations with career challenges worsened by problematic relations with record producers. Signed with Liberty Records, then RCA Victor, Nelson found that the inflexible production style prevalent in Nashville stifled him. All too often, producers over-orchestrated his songs with lush strings and backing vocals, further burying his recognizable voice and robbing his music of authenticity. This clash of creative visions led to continued commercial disappointment and left Nelson questioning his future in the industry. Determined to take charge of his music, Nelson made the bold decision to leave Nashville for Austin, Texas, in the early 1970s. The lively countercultural scene of Austin favored his more freewheeling, more rebellious attitude toward country music. Here, he began working with new producers, including Arif Mardin and later Waylon Jennings, who helped him hone that stripped-down outlaw country sound. This change of direction proved to be a turning point for Nelson. Not fazed by the constraints of Nashville and with producers who understood his vision, he laid the foundation for his eventual success with albums like Shotgun Willie in 1973 and Red-Headed Stranger in 1975. One would have expected Nelson to fold in the face of the early struggles he faced, but he remained resilient, and it helped solidify his reputation as a pioneer, unwilling to compromise on his art. Before we talk about Nelson's relationship with Kris Kristofferson, let's understand the background of the great musician and how he came to be so recognized in the music scene. Looking at his career, it has been a long trail of success that has solidified him as a germ. Kris Kristofferson has been one of the tallest figures in American music, known for his touching penmanship, sensitive voice, and contribution to country and folk music genres. Born on June 22, 1936, in Brownsville, Texas, Kristofferson was born to an officer's family in the U.S. Army Air Corps, which helped instill a sense of discipline in him from a very tender age. Away from early academic and athletic success, he soon plunged into his musical career that eventually would leave a mark in the memory of the recording world. He had begun his career as a musician while attending Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship studying English literature. It was there that he was first exposed to the great tradition of storytelling and folk music. After graduation, Kristofferson followed his father's footsteps into the U.S. Army. He was a helicopter pilot. Still, the pull of music proved too strong to ignore, and he would later toe the path that he was meant for. In 1965, he did the unthinkable. He resigned from the military to become a songwriter. This came at a great personal expense, as his family wasn't totally in support of this move. Kristofferson moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and began taking up odd jobs, such as working as a janitor and a helicopter pilot for oil rigs, while trying to sell songs to record executives. Kristofferson's big break came when his songs began to attract the attention of established artists. Roger Miller recorded his song, "Me and Bobby McGee," which showed Kristofferson's seeming ability to marry a sense of narrative to raw emotion. This broke the door open for other artists, and soon Johnny Cash recorded his tender, stark Sunday Morning Coming Down, a lonely, longing music that went to #1 and clinched Kristofferson's status as a songwriter. In 1970, Kristofferson released his self-titled first album, which included gems such as "Help Me Make It Through the Night," "For the Good Times," and "Me and Bobby McGee." Though they were only minor hits upon their release, these three numbers alone would eventually become country music standards, being recorded respectively by Sammy Smith, Elvis Presley, and Ray Price. Kristofferson's uncanny knack for crafting intensely personal and introspective lyrics, as compared to the others of that genre, made him connect with audiences right away. His career really flowered during the 1970s, with a string of well-acclaimed albums, such as The Silver-Tongued Devil and I in 1971 and Jesus Was a Capricorn in 1972. In addition to his solo work, he was also part of the outlaw country movement with Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Johnny Cash in the supergroup known as the Highwaymen. These collaborations redefined country music, taking traditional themes and reinstituting them as freshly rebellious. Among many other accolades, Kristofferson's work in music earned him the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2004. His songs, lyrically poetic and candid, influenced a generation of musicians and have sealed his position among the best songwriters ever. And though he would rise to superstardom, Kristofferson never forgot his country roots, making such universal themes as love, loss, and redemption common in his music. It was this huge mark that brought him together with Willie Nelson, who has spoken so much about how much he adores his craft. Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson merged during the most unsettling and transitional period of the 1970s. Both being disbelievers of the rigid music scene in Nashville, their mutual inspiration through some of the toughest and most reflective songwriting and uncanny artistry formed the building blocks of a lifetime friendship and professional relationship. Two iconic artists who would eventually change the face of outlaw country and influence many generations of musicians after them. Their first contact was based on mutual appreciation of each other's work. By the late 1960s, Kristofferson was an established songwriter with major hits including Me and Bobby McGee and Sunday Morning Coming Down. Meanwhile, Nelson, though still struggling to break into Nashville, had gained the town's respect as a songwriter for classics like Crazy and Nightlife. When Nelson moved to Austin, Texas in the early 1970s, he joined a growing number of similarly minded artists, which included Kristofferson, who shared his visions for country music farther out than the country norm. Kristofferson had a great influence on Nelson's reincarnation. The instance when Nelson wanted to give up on the musician scene because he had constant failures, the success of Kristofferson showed him that out there was a market for songwriting that was truthful and deeply personal. Kristofferson inspired Nelson by being an example, urging him to be uniquely himself. In return, Kristofferson would always bring Nelson up whenever he was in industry circles and helped him secure opportunities to let his career come into bloom. The two men often toured together, both in singing and as songwriters. The two also went beyond music and would star together in the 1979 film The Electric Horseman, really solidifying their friendship. However, their most powerful collaboration would be when they became part of the group The Highwaymen, along with Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. Their first album under the group was entitled Highwaymen in 1985, which consisted of the hit title track to boast each member's strength. Nelson's smooth, soulful delivery simply complemented Kristofferson's gritty, poetic style to evoke a dynamic that reached deep into the souls of audiences. Their musical collaboration didn't end there. The men were fierce promoters of artistic freedom, taking their platforms to lean against the commercialistic bounds of Nashville. United they stood, and this message was amplified to further encourage fellow musicians to make a stand. This helped Kristofferson in his own right, too. In turn, major albums by Nelson, such as the 1975 Red-Headed Stranger, helped to validate the outlaw country movement, allowing the more experimental of Kristofferson's efforts to come to full flower. Eventually, Nelson's popularity ensured that their joint work was revisited, with Kristofferson's songs getting an even wider hearing. The mutual respect and creative synergy of that relationship between Nelson and Kristofferson is personified. In turn, they each extended country music into a genre open to raw emotion, social commentary, and artistic independence. This influence is continuous, and the songs and performances of these two artists continue to stand the test of time as testaments to an incredibly enduring legacy. Sadly, the legendary country icon Kris Kristofferson died September 30th, 2024, at his residence in Maui, Hawaii, at age 88. His family described the singer as a blessing to everyone who knew him, but did not disclose his cause of death. At the news of his passing, friend and collaborator Willie Nelson, who has often spoken of Kristofferson as one of the finest individuals he has ever known, was visibly shaken. Above all, Nelson and Kristofferson are good friends and collaborators at work, and once shared the same group called the Highwaymen, which was also composed of Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. In that group, they rewrote country music history and furthered Kristofferson's poetry and innovative songwriting. Many times, Nelson has spoken of Kristofferson's genius with the lyrical nature and credited him as one of the cornerstones for the outlaw country movement, or a transformer of the genre in general. Kristofferson's influence was manifold, and it influenced not only music but also film and popular culture. He rewrote country music with raw, insightful tales, resulting in masterpieces such as Me and Bobby McGee and Sunday Morning Coming Down. He also gained Hollywood fame for movie acting roles, including the movie A Star is Born. His works have seen him included in the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2004, and he won a number of Grammy Awards. For Nelson, it was the passing of a creative soulmate and a lifelong friend. He still heralds Kristofferson's contributions to music and his indelible mark upon the industry, and works to keep his legacy alive and well for generations to come. Willie Nelson, at 91, stands as a resilient witness to the test of time and passion, when his ability to continue performing on tours and releasing new records, despite major personal health setbacks, is considered. During his 7-decade-long career, Nelson has become one of the most recognizable faces and voices in country music, garnering numerous awards including Grammys and an induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Increasingly, longevity and devotion to his craft are the two qualities being celebrated these days, even as he deals with health problems. In 2024, Nelson took some time off because of some health issues and had some last-minute performance cancellations. One recent example would be his canceling of an appearance for the Outlaw Music Festival stop at the Xfinity Center in Mansfield, Massachusetts on doctor's orders because he needed some rest. But not to worry, he was back on stage within days, lending his special spirit to the devoted audiences and the music that moved him. When he wasn't around, his son Lucas Nelson stepped in and kept the show alive with renditions of classic versions done by his father. Nelson has been pretty vocal that retirement just isn't in the cards, often joking that he retires after every tour, but always seems to get antsy to get back on the road again. His 75th studio album, The Border, which was released this May of 2024, surely captures this artistic vitality. Meanwhile, his projects, such as the forthcoming cannabis cookbook he is working on with his wife Annie, show flexibility and versatility in his cultural output. These are assurances that Nelson's bond with the audience is never shaken. Nelson's perseverance is an example of passion and resilience that can make a career sustainable well into later life. His fans keep on coming, treasuring every moment he shares on and off the stage. We hope you enjoyed the video. Do well to check the channel for other interesting videos, and we will see you in the next one.